Hey guys, I'm Caleb Giddings for Gat Daily, and welcome to a video I've been meaning to do for a long time. This is the great 4-inch mid-sized revolver chambered in .357 Magnum Showdown. I know that was a long name, and I'm sure that the YouTube title for this will be much shorter, but I am in a unique position in that I have one of each of the big three mid-sized .357 Magnum revolvers. I've got a Ruger GP100, I've got a Smith & Wesson 686, and I've got a Colt Python. So today we're going to find out which is better, and we're going to do that based on 5 categories. Each revolver can score a maximum of 10 points in any of these categories, and at the end we'll total up the points and tell you which one is best. But not just best, because we have 3 different categories for best. We have best out of the box, we have best for casual tinkerers, and best for heavy modification. And all of that is going to be very important. Let's take a look at the guns. This is a Ruger GP100 Match Champion in .357 Magnum. It is 6 shots, it's double action, and has a single action function, which is entirely pointless. This is a Colt Python, also in .357 Magnum. It too is double action and has an entirely pointless but really nice single action function. And last but not least is my fairly heavily modified Smith & Wesson 686. It's got a red dot sight, it's been modified to be double action only, and has the best modified trigger of all of the guns that are sitting out here. And we're going to talk about why that's important, because our first category that we're judging, trigger pull. It's not fair to judge the trigger pull of these guns in the condition that they're in, because the GP100 has had a trigger job done to it. The 686 has had a trigger job done to it. Right now, the trigger pull on this GP100 is like 10-ish pounds. That's not bad, especially considering it was like 14 when it came out of the box. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna judge the trigger pulls based on what they were factory. And for that, you're gonna have to trust my judgment on this. Out of the box, the GP100 has a decent, it has a serviceable trigger pull. It's heavy, it stacks a little bit near the end, and it's the grittiest of all of them. So it earns a score of 5 out of 10. It's fine, but it's not great. Up next, we have the 686, which out of the box has a very smooth trigger pull, but is also very heavy. Measured at 15 pounds on this gun when I first got it. Now, it's nowhere near 15 pounds. Right now, after all of the modifications, it's 5 pounds. Yeah. Real good trigger pull after you work on these guns. Like, a modified Smith & Wesson trigger is a thing of beauty. Anyway, so that's that one. I gave it a 6 out of 10 because it is better than the Ruger's trigger pull, but again, it requires modification to be good, so we modified it. Now, last but not least, we have the Colt. Let's show you how good this trigger pull is. That's more like it. 7 pounds. That's factory. Yes, I've shot 2,000 rounds through this gun and it's shot in a little bit, but when I first got it, it was like 9 pounds. So we've taken maybe 2 pounds off it, and it is just wonderful. It's, God, it's good. I love the trigger on this gun more than I have ever loved a factory double action revolver trigger. It's stupid how good this trigger is, and it cracks everything. Every primer that I've thrown under this, it's gone off, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So, for trigger pull, the Colt gets a 9 out of 10. And the only reason it's not a 10 out of 10 is because triggers could always be better. All right, let's talk accuracy. Colt Python, 25-yard group, standing unsupported. Really good group. One of the best. I had one little flyer pulled it low. Here is a standing unsupported group with the 586. This target's about the same size as a B8. Also a really good group. Easy gun to shoot well. And then this is the Ruger GP100, also at 25 yards, also unsupported. Also a really good group. So you can see from the groups that each gun's accuracy potential is about the same, and that's because they're revolvers, and revolvers tend to be very inherently accurate and very easy to shoot. However, we're gonna give the edge to the Colt Python with a score of 10 out of 10 on this, because I found that consistently from group to group, from ammo type to ammo type, it was the best at producing tight groups. With the Smith & Wesson, it gets a 9 out of 10 because it also shot really good groups, but it was more picky about the type of ammo that it wanted to shoot a good group with. And the last is the Ruger, which I give an 8 out of 10 because, again, shot great groups, but it shot great groups with fewer types of ammo than the Colt did. So Colt gets top marks for the accurate gun. There wasn't a bad round that I shot through the Colt. It shot everything into tight little groups at 25 yards. And again, the Smith did pretty well and the Ruger did pretty well. None of these are going to get bad marks for accuracy from me. Now, our next category is reliability. And this is an interesting one because we have this idea in our heads that revolvers are very inherently reliable. And that's true from a certain point of view, because what revolvers are is they're very tolerant of neglect, but they're not tolerant of abuse. So abuse is like when you take a gun and you do, a military style torture test to it. That's abuse. Interestingly, semi-autos are very tolerant of abuse. Revolvers are not. Now, all three of these revolvers have fired over 2,000 rounds, and all of them have done it remarkably well. So the Colt gets 10 out of 10 because it fired 2,001 rounds without being cleaned, which is actually important, and had 0 failures of any type. The Ruger also gets a 10 out of 10 because it fired 2,000 rounds without being cleaned and had 0 failures of any type. And the Smith & Wesson gets a 9 out of 10. The only reason it gets a 9 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10 is because I had to clean it once during the 2,000 rounds. One time because I was starting to get some wonky issues with powder building up under the star, which, if you're familiar with revolvers, the extractor star, when you get fouling that builds up under here, the gun stops working. And this gun, for whatever reason, had powder building up under that star, had fouling building up under that star, so the gun stopped working and I had to clean it one time. So it gets a 9 out of 10 for reliability, which takes us to one of the tougher categories here, and one where the Colt doesn't fare that well. And it's not really the gun's fault, but that's available aftermarket. And available aftermarket is important because it's things like speed loaders, holsters, sights, things that most serious shooters want to change on their guns. The Colt doesn't do well. The reason the Colt doesn't do well is the Python hasn't been around for very long. It was here, and then it was gone, and now it's back. And the problem is a lot of the accessories that were made for it aren't made anymore. And the Pythons that were here that have been sitting around for 30 years are collector's items, and Python people are weirdos who don't want to shoot their guns. So the availability of aftermarket for shooting these things is very low. In fact, with the exception of speed loaders, most of the aftermarket that's available for the Python are holsters that also fit the GP100 and the Smith & Wesson 686. There's only 2 brands of speed loader that I was able to track down that are widely commercially available for the Python. You have your HKS twist knob speed loaders, and you have Safariland Comp 2s. There are not any available aftermarket sights. There's no aftermarket trigger support or anything like that. And again, holsters are only available because they happen to also fit GP100 and 686 holsters. So in this area, I gave the Colt 3 out of 10, and it's pretty generous. Now, moving on, for your available aftermarket, we have the Ruger. The The Ruger gets a pretty good score here. The Ruger gets a 9 out of 10. And I promise you, I'm not trying to junk the Colt on this test, but the Ruger GP100 has lots of aftermarket parts available. You can get grips, you can get springs to change up the action, you can get sights, you can get all manner of holsters, from inside the waistband concealment holsters to outside the waistband holsters, to competition holsters, and there's speed loaders galore for the GP100. You've got your HKSs, you got your Safariland Comp 2s, you got Safariland Comp 3s, you got my favorite, you got the Speed Bees, you got everything. Everything's available for the GP100, so it gets a 9 out of 10. The one that gets the best score, though, is going to be our Smith & Wesson 686. And I think you guys might be able to figure out why this does so well with the aftermarket scores. First off, we got grips. So this gun has so many aftermarket parts on it. It's got aftermarket grips. It's got aftermarket trigger spring. It's got aftermarket hammer. It's got an aftermarket firing pin and firing pin spring. It's got an aftermarket optic mount. It's got an optic on it. And the selection for holsters and speed loaders and everything is amazing. Like, you can build a Smith & Wesson revolver where the only parts that come from Smith & Wesson are the frame and like the cylinder assembly. And you could put everything else in there and have all your gubbins. I mean, like, not like the rebound slide, but you can basically have everything in that revolver be not from Smith & Wesson. And so the 686 wins your aftermarket category, running away 10 out of 10. If it's out there, they make it for a Smith & Wesson and you can probably buy it. Which brings us to an interesting category: ease of customization. How easy is it to work on these guns? And I didn't want to like make this unfair to Colt because they don't have an aftermarket. So we wanted to look at it in the sense of how easy would the Colt be to work on if there was an available aftermarket for it. So I took it apart and I looked at the parts, and it's actually relatively simple. The way the trigger spring and the recoil and the trigger return spring work together, it's not a super complicated machine on the inside, but none of these guns really are. The difficulty with the Colt is the lack of parts and the lack of institutional Colt knowledge that makes it a little bit more difficult to work on. So I gave this a 5 out of 10 because I personally, I'm not a full-on gunsmith. I am a certified armorer. And as an armorer, I would not be comfortable doing modifications to the Colts. I would be comfortable doing minor repairs like part swaps and stuff like that, but nothing beyond that. I would send it to someone who knows what they're doing, like cylinder and slide, for example. Which brings us to the Ruger. How comfortable am I working on a Ruger? I'm very comfortable working on a Ruger, and a Ruger is very easy to work on. The way the gun is designed, once you take the grip off, you can take the mainspring out, and then you can literally just take the hammer out by popping out this pin right here, and then you press on a little button on the inside of this, and the whole trigger assembly just comes right out. And this is one assembly, all right? It's not designed to be taken apart at the operator level. You just have the trigger assembly. You can take the trigger return spring out and put a new one in, but that's it. And it's really, really easy to work on. It's super easy to work on, and I feel very comfortable working on it to the operator level. I'm not taking that trigger pack apart, and that's more than I'm willing to do. Again, for problems like that, it goes in a box, it goes to cylinder and slide, and I don't worry about it. So we gave the Ruger a 7 out of 10 for that. And we give the Smith & Wesson, last but not least, the Smith & Wesson gets a 6 out of 10 because it is a little bit more complicated to work on than the Ruger GP100. You gotta take the grips off. The mainspring is a leaf spring that bends like this, and then you have the rebound slide and all of that other stuff. And even though I'm very comfortable working on one of these guns, the reason I gave it a 6 out of 10 is the existence of this. This is a Smith & Wesson rebound slide installation removal tool. It's a unitasker. It only does one thing. And I know that Alton Brown says unitaskers are bad, but this is the best freaking unitasker in the world because that one thing that it does really, really well. So the fact that I need this, though, to work on the gun in a really efficient way is why the Smith & Wesson only gets a 6 out of 10. So that's it. That's our 5 categories. Let's see where everything finished. Let's tally up those points. The Ruger GP100 finishes with 39 out of 50 points. Pretty good. The Colt Python finishes with 37 out of 50 points. Also pretty good. And the Smith & Wesson 686 finishes with 38 out of 50 points. So all of these are within a point of each other, with your winner being the Ruger, because it has the highest score. But there's more. Let's get to what these ratings actually mean. So, which one of these guns, let's say you're an armorer like me, and you like to tinker with your gun a little bit, right? Which one of these is the best for you? Which one would I say you should buy? The best for casual tinkerers, Ruger GP100 in 357 Magnum. You're going to be able to do some fun things with this gun, but you're also probably not going to be able to break it. Next, we have our best for heavy modification. If you want to put the time and the effort into learning how to work on this gun and learning how to modify it and seeing what you can really do, Smith & Wesson 686 is your best choice for a revolver that you really want to customize. It's great. I have done so much to this gun. I love it. This is probably my second favorite revolver in the universe now. But here's the question that you really wanted. Which one of these is the best out of the box? Like, let's say you just want to go and buy a revolver and have it be accurate, reliable, with a great trigger, and there's holsters and speed loaders available for it. Not a lot, but even the sights on this aren't that bad. Colt Python. And that's my actual opinion here. If you're just looking for a revolver to buy just from the store and you don't want to mess with it, get yourself a Colt Python. By far and away, this is the best out-of-the-box revolver I have dealt with in the past 12 years of serious revolver shooting, and it is just... Colt really hit a home run with this gun. I actually kind of didn't want to like it when I first got it, but it's great. It really is great, and I really like it, and I'm going to end up paying for it and sending Colt a check for it instead of returning it when my trial period's over, because out of the box, it's the best. The last thing I'll mention before I close up this video is price tag, because that's important. Guess which one of those is the most expensive? The Colt. Out of the box, it's the most expensive of the 3. But again, out of the box, it's the best of the 3. I'm Caleb Giddings. Thanks for watching.